House of the Dragon was a show I don't think anybody was particularly excited for, especially after Game of Thrones Season 8. Then it came out and we were all like, Game of Thrones? If you were like me, you were a pretty darn tootin' big fan of Game of Thrones when it was on, and then Season 7 and 8 came out and you were like, yeah, I don't know about this. In fact, don't ever bring this up to me again. I can safely say that House of the Dragon has reinvigorated my love of Game of Thrones. In fact, I may just start reading the books, even though we may never get the end of them. House of the Dragon has been a gimundo success for HBO. And you know what? I'm happy about it. Because the first season, despite not being as good as those first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones, was pretty darn tootin' good. My worry after that was whether they can keep going with it. Thankfully, George has already written all of Fire and Blood, so perhaps we got some good guidelines to keep going on. As for Season 2 of House of the Dragon, is it still good? Yeah, I'd say it's still pretty good. I think I'm gonna do these half-season reviews for stuff when they come out, because why not? Thankfully, Season 2 here, starting out pretty good. It's not to say it's perfect, but you know, it's alright. Not everything has to be perfect. And honestly, most of the problems I have with this half of the season are kind of minute. There's only about one real big problem with the first half of the season. But before we get to that, let's get some positivity in here. Let's talk about the stuff that I like about the first half of the season. I think this goes for the whole of the show, but it obviously continues into this season. It just recaptures the world of Game of Thrones very well. It feels so familiar to go back into Westeros like this. And like I said before, because of this, and it's pretty good writing, it's made me love Game of Thrones again. Not particularly that last half of the show, but for sure that first half. We've had some good moments so far in this first half of the season. Besides what happens in episode 4, which I'll get to, the standout is Blood and Cheese, where these goofily named fellas go into the Red Keep and do a little dirty business. I think despite the show being heavily Team Black oriented, this does a good job at fuzzying the line between good and evil. It shows that even if it may have technically been a mistake, there were some possibly questionable motives behind them. Plus, it was also shot pretty stinking well. Following Blood and Cheese as they go throughout the Red Keep kinda slapped. But to anybody that watches me, you know, I love characters in shows, and the characters here, for the most part, slap. We'll get to Rhaenys in a second. Despite me having allegiance to Team Black, I actually don't hate most of the Greens, which shows that the characters are written well for you to even care enough about them and what happens to them. I like how Aegon is kind of just this frat dude who wants to party hardy and be popular. At the root of it, he just wants to be shown some love and attention. Because even though Viserys was a pretty good dad, he didn't really give that to Aegon. Then you have Kristen Cole, who just might be the Joffrey of this TV show. This guy sucks. The word that comes to mind usually when thinking about him is an incel. He had sex with Rhaenyra one time, and that shit was so crazy, it drove him bonkers for the rest of his life. Kristen Cole may be the pettiest man ever put to pen, but gosh darn it, do I love hating him. He's like a hateable, dumb, smart guy. You know, once he's named Hand of the King, he's gonna mess it up pretty bad, because he's not particularly smart, but then he also is smart because you see in episode 4 that he had an actual pretty good plan. So out of people who would be considered a villain on this show, I think Kristen Cole takes the cake, because every time I see him on screen, I just get mad. The same goes for Alicent as well. Someone who's such an idiot, she helped cause a nationwide conflict. Good for you! We can't talk about this without talking about Rhaenyra, though. Obviously, best character on the show because she's the main character, let's be real. Despite a dumb decision that we'll get to in the bad, I love how she actually cares about what happens. She feels the weight of the responsibility given to her by Viserys, and that she says in this that sounds like she was even willing to give up the crown if it meant keeping peace in Westeros. Obviously, though, peace was never an option, because we get the best scene in the show so far with episode 4, where we have a pretty big ground assault on a fort that involves some dragons. I love big, well-shot battle scenes in medieval stuff, and I think as good as Battle of the Bastards was, this kind of might be a little better. And I say that because in Battle of the Bastards, it's kind of hard to see stuff sometimes. I get that was the point, but still, in this, everything is quite visible and the choreography of everybody just going at each other makes it feel dirty and raw. Makes it feel like a real medieval skirmish that would go on. Excusing the dragons, of course, because we do get some dragon fights, and despite being Team Black and also being anti-dragons, thank you Skyrim, I actually felt bad for Sunfire as she was getting messed up by Meleys. And again, the way this was shot, everything was clear. You could tell exactly what was going on. It felt almost as dirty and raw.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
As the fight on the ground. Overall, I think the majority of the first half of season 2 is pretty stinking good. For the most part, we're staying on the main plot and we're going along at a pretty decent pace. But with everything, there are some bads with it. Like I said, nothing really major here, but I gotta talk about it. The biggest thing is we're wasting our time with Daemon. I like Harrenhal as much as the next guy, and it's cool that it's haunted. It's a big spooky haunted castle. Cool, let's hang out there for an episode maybe. But it's been 4 episodes. Daemon has done nothing. In fact, for 2 of them, he's basically just been sleeping at his friend's house. Now, it's not as big of a problem as something like The Boys, where they're pretty much towards the end of their show, and they're focusing on some stuff that just feels like time filler. The Daemon stuff, as of now, does feel like time filler, but I can give it some more leeway because we're still in the beginning of the show, I assume. If I had to guess, 4 or 5 seasons for this. If this was the time to drag your feet and kind of put some filler in there, it would be now instead of later. That's not me excusing the filler, because I hate filler in shows. I think The Walking Dead having 90% filler really turned me off of that stuff. So yeah, the Daemon stuff, not really great. You also had the Eric and Eric side plot, which just felt really unnecessary. Like, if you took them out, like what is the difference? I actually thought they were cool characters being introduced in season 1 for a little bigger role, and then they were just like, yeah, no, you're gonna die. Really didn't serve any purpose. I mean, I guess it pushes that brother against brother kind of thing, but I feel like you really could have done that in a better way. Have them really build up to it, or even have them switch sides, maybe? I don't know, but it felt stupid. Alright, it was wasted time. The mentions of the White Walkers and the prince that was promised, I get it's important, but it hurts to hear about it when we know what happens and how lame and bad it was. It's really a nitpick, but with the amount it was focused on in this first half, especially the last 2 episodes that we saw, kind of just don't like it. I also think Rhaenyra's plan to go meet Alicent, although on paper makes sense, in execution it feels really stupid. And what's interesting is when I rewatched that scene, they both kind of acknowledged how stupid it is, which kind of alleviates it a little bit. But I feel like we gotta stop characters from making stupid decisions, and I think we will get less of that now, because the dumbest character in the show is dead. Woo! Guys, even if you liked Rhaenys, let's be real. She is a Neanderthal. She's got poo brain. She's like Lenny from Of Mice and Men. Obviously, when talking about this, we gotta talk about the season finale of season 1, where she had the entire team green in front of her, and she knew she was going to go and join Rhaenyra and probably go to war. And she was just like, I could save all these people from dying. I don't really want to be the one to start the war. I want somebody else to be. Even though right after that, they killed Rhaenyra's son. But yeah, I'm good. They're right there. Not doing anything. I did just murder a bunch of these townsfolk in front of them, though. But you know what? I've had enough killing for the day. I'm sorry, saying you don't want to be the one to start the war, even though your intentions are very clear that you're not going to be supporting them, and you're probably going to be killing them later. Not a great excuse. You could have saved so many lives, but you chose not to. Then we have episode 4 this season, where she has the perfect opportunity to fly off into the sunset back to Dragonstone, or even just fly back to get some more dragons. And she says, no, I'm good. I'm going to not only eventually put a hole into the fort so they can take it way easier, I'm also just gonna kill my dragon, waste one of our dragons, and myself. And what did I accomplish? I burned the king. Great. Now you could argue that it would weaken their standing if their dragon flew away during a hard conflict. Fair enough. But to that I say, seeing as how dragons are essentially 115 teleporters, and Dragonstone is not that far away from the fort, she could have gone back, said, yeah guys, they got Vhagar over there, could I get some backup here? And then we could kill him. Would have been hunky-dory. The battle still would have probably been going on, because it didn't look like they were using him for the fort. A dragon is so much more strategically useful than that small fort. But then you also could have had Rhaenys do all that stuff, and then as she's flying away, looking around for Vhagar, maybe realize that there's a giant cliff right there, the only place that could store a giant ass dragon. But she's like, you know what? He's not in the sky. He's not below me. He's not around me. I guess he's gone. He's most certainly not behind this big cliff that's the perfect size for him. I mean, come on. Rhaenys, just the dumbest character in the show. Honestly, a liability to Rhaenyra. I could kind of put this in the good because she's gone, but she also just has really bad writing and she's a bad character. So I'm putting her in the bad. Overall though, guys, I really am liking this season. It's quite good. It's almost amazing. But what do you guys think? Do you like House of the Dragon? Do you think my negatives of the show make me an invalid troglodyte? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.